Good afternoon, everybody. I am your host, Julian Ortiz of the Big O Podcast, and today I am joined by none other than the FeeNom, Felicia Spencer. Felicia, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, Julian.
No, listen, thanks for doing this. I know times have been a little bit busy. You've had a very busy couple of months, obviously now with COVID sort of striking. It's kind of been a little bit weird, I guess I would say. But how are you managing during COVID-19, during the quarantine?
I'm doing fine. I always just look at whatever, is in my control, so for me, there's only one way to be, just look forward and take things as they come, I can only control so much in the world. So that's what I'm doing, so I'm lucky to have my husband on the same page and, we both have a good outlook on things.
That's an interesting thing when you talk about control, because one of your backgrounds is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Which is all about control, right? It's all about giving and taking and the ebbs and flows. And so it's interesting that you take that as like your mantra, I guess, as you will, when it comes to dealing with things.
Yeah.
I wanted to reach out to you because obviously, you are from Montreal, Quebec, so a good Canadian. Anytime we see the Canadian flag next to a fighter, a boxer, MMA, we always have that, that itch to root for them. And obviously that has been the case. I've been able to follow your career since you joined the UFC. Listen, I have some words for Sean Shelby. Your first 4 fights in the UFC hasn't exactly been, the easiest road of any MMA person to start their career in the big organization, right?
For sure. And my matchmaker is actually Mick Maynard.
Oh, Mick, that's right. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so Mick, I'm going to have some words for you.
I knew what I was getting into from the beginning, and I knew that with the divisions landscape that, things would move quickly, and that didn't deter me at all. For some people in their situation, in their division, that would be maybe not as good of an idea. You'd want to build up yourself and get to that point where you're ready to take on the greats. But for me, I knew it would happen quickly, and I wanted to take full advantage of the opportunity. And now, I had the opportunity to fight 2 of the greatest, probably the 2, top 2 greatest female athletes of all time in less than 1 year time.
Yeah.
So that's what I knew it would happen quickly, and that was what I was pushing for. It didn't turn out the way I was hoping, but that didn't deter me either way.
I mean, considering you went through 2 wars in those 2 fights, I mean, we're talking about the Cris Cyborg fight and then the Amanda Nunes fight. Cris Cyborg, you hit and opened up a pretty nice cut on her. And I remember post-fight, that's one of the things that she said, you gave me my first cut, and she was very, thankful for a cut, as anyone could sort of be. But she definitely talks about the toughness of you standing in there and going to war for 5 rounds. And then you turn around and do that again with Amanda Nunes just, less than a year ago. And again, it's the same sort of thing. We saw it for anyone who was watching, but to be in that octagon, to share that with you, and to have 2 of the greatest, combat sports, if not athletes of all time, as you said, what does that mean for you? I mean, I know it's hard to take sort of like moral victories, but, what was that feeling, knowing that you went toe to toe with 2 of the greatest athletes and stood your ground?
Yeah. Well, to kind of bring it back to the Canadian thing, I was proud to be able to put, the Canadian flag up, in a title fight. It's been a while. So that part of me, I was just so happy, so grateful for the Canadian fans that have been really supportive of my career, especially in the UFC. But, like I said, I didn't go in to fight to get moral victories, but,
yeah,
it is, I guess, nice that the fights sort of happened the way that they happened, where I could take away something. There was definitely a lot more I wish I was, a lot more that I wish I did, especially in this last fight. I felt like there was just, a lot of empty room for me. So, but I'm looking back on it. I'm grateful that I went for it. Like I said, I knew that things would happen quickly, and I didn't shy away. I just tackled what was in front of me, did the best I could, and things could have gone better, but I don't have any regrets about it. And it's made a big difference. And just looking forward, I don't feel like, I guess I just feel less pressure moving forward because
Right.
I've already been against the top, and we'll see where things go. And it's put myself in my life in a good position also. So it all went pretty well
I mean,
overall.
8-2 is definitely not like a professional record. It's definitely not anything to raise your nose at, right? Like, listen, you went 6-0 in Invicta. You started on, I believe, was like a reality sort of fight. Was it like I think it was called Tough? Are you Tuff-N-Uff or Tough-N-Uff?
It wasn't the famous Tough like
Yeah,
the show, but it's Tuff-N-Uff is the amateur tournament.
right.
It's in big. It does have a pretty big stage. A lot of great UFC fighters went through that organization. Ronda Rousey, I know, went through it also. A bunch of people have gone through it, but that was an interesting time for me because as an amateur fighter, I live in Florida. I've lived in Florida a long time. Um, Traveling to Vegas for a fight was like, oh my God, you made it, and
Yeah.
I'm just an amateur fighter at that point. That was such a big deal. I was so happy to be able to have sponsors to help me get there, pay for the plane ticket because of course amateurs don't get paid, so they don't get stuff like that paid for. So just having that experience really like set me up for what was coming, and eventually winning the through that tournament, I won the Invicta contract to make my pro debut in Invicta. So it all felt really big for a really long time in my career. Like it always felt really, really big stage. And every time I would win, I would get a next level up. And it would just be like, it's still a huge, like every time I would win, it was just like, man, it's never the same. It's
Yeah.
always just like another level up. And so I was kind of used to that feeling. Like when I made my UFC debut and then I fought Cyborg the next fight, it was just like, this feels normal because every time I fight, it's like the next step is so much bigger for me. It all happened really quickly. So I was kind of getting used to that feeling of the level up.
And that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people who sometimes get the opportunity don't rise to that occasion, right? So you go through that amateur circuit, you go 6-0 through Invicta, you end up beating Pam Sorensen in a rear naked choke, which is kind of like your signature win, I would say. I mean, mode of win. I
Yeah.
mean, and so you win the featherweight Invicta title. And at that time, the UFC kind of has a featherweight division. It's sort of like in limbo because they have Cyborg who tried to do the cut and it wasn't. She was fighting a lot of catch weights, and then Amanda Nunes really steps up and says, "Listen, I will fight at the heavier weight because everyone wants to be the champ nowadays." And then you have someone like Megan Anderson who you got to fight as well, who is that natural featherweight in that division. You went through three of those fighters. And so a lot of people are wondering, what is the next step for the featherweight division? Because I'm sure cutting weight to get to 145 isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do or something that you want to do. Obviously, you probably don't want to cut any more weight to go down and fight for the bantamweight title. But what's next for you? Because you've sort of been at the top of the mountain. What would be the next sort of fight that maybe you're looking forward to either at the end of the year or maybe going into 2021?
Yeah, the time frame is on point, end of the year or early next year. And because it's so foggy right now, there's not really a clear path. I'm kind of just like, okay, I'm just not even gonna worry about it
Right.
because I'm not trying to fight over the next couple months, so it doesn't really matter. And the landscape changes so fast, especially in my division,
Yeah.
that 3 months from now, it could look totally different. There could be opportunities. There could be no opportunities in the UFC. They might, like say they close the division down if Amanda retires. Like, so I have no idea. I hope that they keep the division and that they sign more fighters and opportunities come. But I'll kind of look at it again in a few months when I'm getting closer to being in fight camp or to wanting to take a fight, and then kind of see what the landscape looks like. Because right now, kind of like you're feeling is very uncertain.
For
So
sure.
I have
Yeah.
no idea. I would like to see, I hope that Amanda stays active. I would love to see Megan fight Amanda. She was it was like me or her. So I'd like to see her fighter. I think every fighter has a shot against any other fighter. You know, I could have lost every fight of my career, just like I could beat anyone in front of me. Just a matter of the decisions that you make in the moment and whose decision was better at that very moment in time. We're all talented and we all belong there. So it comes down to little moments. But yeah, again, it's so uncertain that I can only hope for a good opportunity to come, and I'll stress about it later on.
I mean, you talked about moments, which I mean, 100%, and just don't want to take the focus away from you, but talking about Amanda and who she sort of fought over the last couple of fights. I mean, she ran into a little bit of a ground issue with Drain Durandamy, because on the ground, on her back, she was looking to try to lock up some triangles, trying to go for like an armbar. And Amanda looked, as much as she was enforcing the ground and pound, looked to potentially get caught in a few situations. She exchanged with Holly Holm in their fight. And Cyborg, I mean, you flip a coin, one person is just that much faster.
How many times have we, you know, I've seen it with many teammates even, you know, if you're standing toe to toe like that, it's very reminiscent of when Dillashaw fought.
Cody?
Or no, not when Cody fought someone else. You know, he had just lost the belt and then he fought someone else and they were just
Pedro Munoz.
Exactly. It reminds me of that so much because they were just both toe to toe swinging and either one of them could go down. You know, it happens all the time. Like you said, just that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, you know, we were hoping for a different outcome when you set the stage, but we know that, you know, down the road, whether it's, you know, at the UFC, whether it's back in Invicta, depending on what happens, as you said, with the division, I mean, we know this is not the end of you. This has been a lifetime of mixed martial arts, and which is where I want to sort of shift the focus to begin with. You, from Montreal, Quebec, how did you get into, I think it was a Taekwondo that was your first discipline?
It was, yeah. It was really just that I have two older brothers. That I have, you know, my parents that just wanted us to not only have something that we could all do together, but you know, especially my mom. My dad was in the military. My mom was very, you know, a big proponent of being able to defend herself and all that kind of stuff. So she wanted some kind of martial art, and that was what was available, you know, at the time. So that's how I got started. I was 4 years old and started, you know, going to class with my brothers, and then I loved it. I was good at it for the age I was. I was having fun. I was good at it, and I just kept doing it. And you know, as we became teenagers, you know, we were able to kind of find our own way. My oldest brother kind of stopped with the martial arts a lot sooner. My middle brother and I stuck with it a lot longer together. He did jiu-jitsu with me when I was 12. We started doing jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But eventually he found his passion, you know, so he kind of stopped. And then I was always drawn to it. I never wanted to stop. So I just kept picking up different skill sets and training in different arts. And here I am, you know.
Now it's funny because when I was doing a little bit of research just to lead up to this, one of the things that came across me that sort of stunned me was your full-time job. And that was, you know, you are a sixth grade math teacher. Is that correct?
It's sort of. And I actually, in May, when I signed my contract to fight Amanda, I actually went ahead and put in my notice that it was kind of time to step away and focus a little bit. But up until 2 months ago, throughout my whole professional career, it was an algebra teacher for virtual school, so it was 6th to 12th graders. So it was nice to have a big variety of students to talk to. But yeah, so I was a full-time teacher. The nice thing about having a virtual class is it was a little bit more flexible. So I would work, you know, from 8 until 8, you know, in the morning till the night. But then I could stop for a couple hours and go train and, you know, come back and keep working and then go back and train and come back and keep working. So it made for long days, which is part of the reason why I kind of wanted to pull away from it. Just to, you know, I feel like I would have regretted it if, you know, at the end of my fighting career, if I didn't like have a little bit of time where I could really try to, you know, focus 100% on it and focus 100% on myself during the time.
And that's got to be one of those things where I try to imagine myself in grade 6 or up to grade 12, having a teacher who's teaching me algebra, who's coming to work with like bruises or cuts, or even just knowing that my teacher is out there like fighting or kicking ass like on the weekend, and I watched her, and then Monday morning I know we're gonna get into the latest algebra equation. What was that like for either your students or even parents that you might have connected with for the virtual school? Like, did any of them share any feedback or any thoughts on it?
Yeah, and I spent a very little amount of time in a physical school where it was very different, but I'll focus on the virtual school. But most of the students never mentioned it. They never
Wow.
they didn't really talk amongst each other because it was just one on one with me.
Oh,
So
okay.
for the few that did, it was surprisingly low amount. Maybe they just never mentioned it if they found out. I don't know, but
Right.
very probably like 10 or 12 students over the last 5 years have mentioned anything about it. But the ones that did, it was usually because maybe they trained jujitsu or they have something in common and that they were, oh wow, you do that too, and then they were, we had a good little connection there. Or there was one that I will always remember as being like the one that was, he was like, oh wow, you have a full-time job and you're a full-time fighter, and I should be able to do my math homework, hard. It's like 3 assignments a week, So I was like, yeah, it's like, and I never thought he would change his ways, because, a lot of students don't do their work. It is what
Yeah.
it is. But he actually, from that moment, started to do his work, and I was like, oh my God, one kid actually started to change because of something I did. I was like, out of all the thousands of students that came in, one of them really started to do their homework after they, had a conversation with me about it. So, but yeah, then I had a lot of, there was actually another student that I was at a grappling tournament with I teach jujitsu at my gym for the kids. So I was taking them to do a tournament, and it was out of town, but still in Florida. And one of my students came up to me. I didn't know he was my virtual student at the time because I don't really have faces to names.
Right.
He came up to me and he said, "You're my math teacher." And I said, "Oh my God." And he's like, "Can I give you a hug?" I'm like, "Of course." So he was, I guess kind of like shocked to see me, and knew of, it was after I fought Cyborg and everything. So it was kind of like a bigger name, I guess. But I saw his mom and she was all excited. So it was cool. It was a really cool experience. The virtual classroom is a very different experience, but still a lot of really good connections there.
That's pretty cool. Like, cause I'm trying to imagine like in my days in school, if I knew that I had a teacher who was doing that, I don't know if I would have probably said anything too. One, because obviously it's not a secret, but like, how do you approach something like that? But I'd also be pretty like inspired, being like, my teacher is like, could kick your teacher's butt. So like, you don't want to cross this teacher. Um, and then the other aspect of it too, like I have two young daughters, and the landscape is definitely changing when it comes to more women visibly in sports. And for like whether it's like soccer, there's a like a new soccer league that's just starting up, but obviously like women in soccer have been incredible, especially when it comes to like the United States, for instance, who've just sort of creamed everybody when it comes to the World Cup for so many years, and softball, and then in Canada hockey, the Canadian women's team and the US team are always going toe to toe with that kind of stuff. But it's funny because many years ago Dana White had said we'll never have women in the UFC, and Ronda Rousey really sort of changed that and forced a hand because it was something that had to be embraced. And now you're going to start to see way more young people watching this and get inspired. For instance, my daughter, when we're watching, Fight Pass, or if it's she's staying up past her bedtime and I haven't told her mom that she's doing this, and we're watching, UFC, she is replicating the punches, the movements. She likes to wrestle. And now she has someone who she can like identify with. And for me as a parent, seeing people like you or Michelle Watterson, seeing people who you have that positive role model to say, hey, this could be me one day, is definitely like an amazing thing as a parent, because sometimes it just doesn't translate the same way when you see someone of the opposite gender doing it.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
what sort of impact have you seen, I guess, in the last throughout your career, I guess, with with women or young girls coming up to you and looking at you as a role model now?
Yeah, it's been very touching, and I do get that a lot. I get like you said, a lot of parents, a lot of dads especially, have sent me messages, you know, just just kind of saying exactly like what you said. And for me, it just makes me just want to keep doing what I'm doing, and keep, just being myself, and not wanting to change the way I approach things or the way I approach my career for more likes on Instagram
Right.
or for potentially more money or something. Like, it makes me feel good that I've made the decisions that I have, and they hopefully, like you said, there are some young, boys, or but mainly, a lot of girls kind
Yeah.
of can relate, and have a role model to. It's very touching for me. Even my husband has a daughter, with another woman, so we've been together for since she was 4 years old. So it's been like 5 years of her life. Um, she's, I call her like my own, but she does have a biological mother, and her mother has messaged me the same thing, that she was very, just so grateful that I was the stepmom, so
Yeah.
like that I had an influence on her, and she was thankful. And that kind of relationship, a good relationship with a blended family, doesn't happen all the time. So
No, for sure.
I'm really happy to be, things aren't always, easy, but at least I know, like, my stake in the game is like a positive one. So it definitely feels good to have that, have people think that I influence their children in a good way. It's I couldn't exchange that for anything.
Well, it's interesting because, like, as a teacher, you obviously want to get into teaching to help mold minds, right? You want to help the next generation to achieve their goals. And you do that not only by, or when you were teaching, but also by leading by example. And I wanted to bring up Addie. I wanted to bring up the fact that, you know, being a stepmom, biological mom, it doesn't matter. She has an amazing role model. And she has her dad, who's also a mixed martial artist. So what is it like in that household with Addie when, you know that you have two kick-ass parents as opposed to just, one now? What is it like? What is home life like? Is Addie getting into any of these things? Has she shown any interest, or is she kind of like, we'll let you guys keep to what you're doing?
She is, when she's here with us, she's, we get her here in Florida for a few months at a time, and she lives in Illinois. She's more into soccer, which we fully
Okay.
support. She definitely enjoys doing like the jujitsu classes that we do and kickboxing classes, but I think she enjoys it because the other students we have in class happen
Right.
to be, some really awesome kids that are also her age. There was like a group of five girls her age that all clicked, and they're all great friends. And that kind of camaraderie, I know, comes from martial arts. Like, it happened for me, and I mean, I'm married to someone I trained with, So
Yeah.
for me, it was, whether she enjoys the pure sport of jujitsu or if she's just having a good time, it doesn't matter. So, but when she's back home in Illinois, she's doing usually soccer and stuff like that, which is, we cheer her on. She does spend a lot of time like hanging out at the gym when she's here. So, we don't want to like push it on her if she doesn't want to. It's fine, but she gets enough time just hanging out at the gym with us for sure.
And I mean, that's also got to be a unique dynamic as well when it comes to both you and your husband being in the mixed martial arts game. When it comes to training or traveling, having an understanding of what the responsibilities are and the time and dedication it takes on both parts. Obviously, you're part of the UFC. You were formerly of Invicta, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your husband made his pro debut. His last fight was his pro debut.
Yeah, yeah.
And what organization is he fighting in right now?
It was for Combat Night. He's not under contract, but it'll probably be with Combat Night, for a little while. Um, yeah, and I know he's been training and fighting for a long time too. Just the things didn't line up as quickly for him as they did for me.
Oh,
But
fair
either way,
enough.
with Addie, she can, she can look up to him, and see, like, we always talk to her about, you know, it's okay to not do good all the time, but if you just keep doing it, you can practice makes perfect, or close to perfect.
Yeah.
So she sees that, like, we try not to get frustrated when we don't do good. We try to show, like you said, lead by example. Um, we try to, just promote a healthy lifestyle, as much as an active lifestyle. And, it's not always, we're definitely not like so strict that kids, she can't have
Yeah,
fun either. Definitely,
for sure.
I think another like mantra I live by is everything in moderation, including moderation.
For
So
sure.
gotta go with the balance sometimes. So yeah,
It,
she has a good time.
it's interesting because like the thing that strikes me about jiu-jitsu is that when you're rolling with someone, like you're gonna get tapped, you're gonna tap someone, and so you're
Yeah.
not always gonna win. It's not like a sport like tennis or soccer where you can just be like dominant all the time, go undefeated, and you're never ever gonna experience loss. In jiu-jitsu, you're gonna lose, but that's what's gonna make you better. And I feel like maybe that sort of mentality going through something like that where, like you said, moderation, sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose. You just pick yourself back up and you try your best and you do everything that you can. I feel like martial arts, I never got into martial arts. I did karate, but I cried like a baby when like my mom would leave. And so like my mom took me out of that class like really quickly. But it's one of the things that like I want like my girls to experience. I have two very like young daughters, and I know the oldest one, who just turned 3 back in May, is itching for the opportunity, and we're trying to figure out the right time to get her into these classes. But now obviously with COVID, things have shut down a little bit, and we're maybe gonna hold off a little while. But she will look at she'll do like Muay Thai Zoom classes every once in a while. She'll do stuff on YouTube and she'll follow along, and she loves it. Sometimes doesn't know that she can only be like that with dad and not her younger sister. So
Yeah.
sometimes she'll practice the takedown on our youngest daughter, and it doesn't always end well for dad. Dad always has to explain to mom why the
Yeah.
baby's crying.
Yeah.
Um, but it is one of those things like camaraderie, like you talked about, right? Like being around others who want to do it, their age, their skill set, and not forcing it upon them. It's very easily to do those things, but it seems like you and your husband are doing a fantastic job with that. Now, training for a fight, training to stand in front of someone, punch them without them punching you, or kick them, or take them down, or submit them. There's a lot of training that goes into it. On average, how long do you have for a fight camp? And what are the things that you're really focusing on for that fight camp?
So typically I would plan to have a 8-week camp that I would call it, where things really ramp up and I'm doing a lot more and really, extra strict with diet and stuff like that. Um, Normally my weeks would be like Sunday, I would have one really hard conditioning session with my team. Usually we have like a fight team that comes in and sprints and all kinds of stuff like that. That would usually be like an hour and a half long. So conditioning is a big part. Like Mondays, I would do, I like doing like regular classes to not just always be thinking about my opponent. It's not 100%
Right.
just always on them, usually. So I like to do, I think I would normally do like a leg day, and then I would have jujitsu, kickboxing, and then a sparring session also, and teach the kids class. So a long day for Monday. I usually just do like an hour of kickboxing and jujitsu each every day, and then some kind of a conditioning, either cardio or strengthening, pretty much every day.
Right.
With one, I usually make one rest day where I would try to just do like yoga, something super easy going, like not power yoga, just regular
Yeah.
kind of yoga. You make that mistake once. But yeah, I really just try to mix it up. If I'm in a routine, I try to switch things up and, just do something a little out of the ordinary sometimes. Like I added in, one of my coaches went back to his roots also, and he was a karate black belt growing up, and he started doing karate at the gym, started his own little class. So I started to do that just to kind of, move differently and
Yeah.
think differently. And I do a lot. I think my training involves a lot of cage work too. I
Okay.
think that's shown a lot in a lot of my fights, and I think yeah, I think on the cage I do a lot of training because a lot of people don't So maybe they don't think about it, but it's a huge part of fighting in a cage is knowing how to work on and off of a cage.
Right.
So, yeah, and this last fight camp was very different. Obviously, it was also not 8 weeks. It was about 12 weeks instead because it was postponed, and then I had to keep training because it was not that far off. So, and it was a lot more focused on my opponent too. It was every time I trained, it was 100% thinking about my opponent, which is definitely different, but which I liked. Leading up to it, I was kind of like thinking how every session was very intense and focused. So it was a little different than usual, though.
So, focusing on that last fight. So there are two things I want to talk about. The first thing is Amanda. How do you prepare for someone like that? Like, what was your game plan if you know you're going to win the fight? What does that look like for you?
One thing I was not successful in was obviously getting her down, getting her to the cage. I didn't think I would have such a hard time sort of cornering her and getting her to the cage. Usually it happens pretty naturally for me.
Right.
So I feel like that would have been a key for me to have control and not absorb the strikes that I was absorbing, which definitely played a part in my cognitive ability to think about what to do next.
Right.
It does change the rhythm when she obviously hits hard. So it changes a little bit of your I don't know, I guess I was a little bit more timid on doing things after maybe the second round, and then it just started to kind of get in my head a little bit, like, why am I being timid? This doesn't happen. I don't do this. This is not how I am. And then next thing you know, the round's over and you're still just thinking about why you're being timid, So it was definitely some things that were different that I didn't experience in other fights, like mainly like getting someone to the cage, and then also just like I was kind of in my own head a lot during the fight, which makes me kind of just, I was just in my head and I couldn't get out of it. So those were the two biggest things I kind of look back on. I did intend to be able to take her down from the center of the cage.
Right.
But again, I was kind of in my head about it, so I wasn't going for it like I should have been.
Well, you were fighting two people. You're fighting Amanda, and then you're fighting yourself in your head. It's a 2-on-1 is not an easy situation for you to overcome. But it's funny because Mike Tyson has this famous quote that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And you can see it sometimes. You can see it with fighters where they're moving forward, they're walking their opponent down, and then they get hit with something that they weren't expecting to get hit. And they always say the punch you don't see coming is the one that hurts the most. And you took your lumps, but at the same time, like, there was no quit. And it was one thing that they talked about on the broadcast is that, she's absorbing these punches, and you did absorb a few big ones, but it wasn't as if like every punch was a bomb. Like, you were able to move out of the way. You tried to get in there, but you definitely, tough as nails. One of the craziest things I've ever seen. You're just thinking like, how is this person still going? And you're doing it, and you're not backing down, and you don't want to quit. And over the last few months, we've definitely seen times where coaches have had to make the decision on whether or not to call the fight because their fighter is they just don't have it that day, and they don't want them to take more punishment than they need to. Was that ever a thought in your corner that maybe today's just not the day for Felicia? Let's, bounce back and live to fight another day?
So that's a really, really important topic, and I know it's come up a lot recently, especially, I think, especially, what's his name? Oh my gosh. Anthony Lionheart. Either way, Lionheart. That was like what really the catalyst to this conversation recently, I think, and it's happened a few times. So a couple of things. No, it didn't cross their mind. I know that the broadcast team was saying it a couple of times. For my situation, there wasn't ever a time where I was just strictly, covering turtle, not trying to do something or defend myself. I wasn't ever wobbled. Like, comes to mind when Tony Ferguson was fighting Gaethje, and he was
Yeah.
clearly wobbling on his feet for a few rounds,
Yeah.
and there are, my next point will come up too. Like, I wasn't ever like in that situation where I was just out on my feet. I was,
Yeah.
that wasn't the situation. But also, there are times where there was a kid recently that just called it quits between rounds on his own,
Yeah.
even though his corner was trying to push him. And that's because, in his situation, that might have been a good decision because, he was getting outclassed. The other guy was just one step ahead of him the whole time, which is like what happened in my fight.
Yeah.
But he's a young kid. I think it was his debut or something. And what is there to gain from going forward, from doing that? For
sure.
me, it was a title fight. It was, the pinnacle. So it does, in my opinion, change things. That's why we have amateur and professional and everything in between. The levels do change and the circumstances change. I think when there's a title fight, things can be, you kind of put more on the line. I'm putting a lot more on the line. I want that opportunity. And my coaches know that I had what it took to get a finish, just didn't happen. So for me, my mentality, like, I always am holding on to that hope that I'll be able to find a way to win like I normally do.
Well, especially in your sport, right? Where it doesn't take much. A single punch, a kick, a trip can change everything in the blink of an eye, right? So, I mean, they always say there's a puncher's chance that you could get back into, but the three examples you brought up were fantastic. I mean, obviously Anthony Smith, he said there was no way that they should have stopped the fight. Like, he, in his own mind, wanted to continue to fight. Tony Ferguson was definitely hard to watch because from the second, he just seemed off the entire fight. I mean, I know someone who I'd asked, who was close to Tony and said, the double weight cut within a week is definitely not something anyone ever wants to do. Obviously, we had the UFC fighter who just fought twice in 10 days, who at two different weight classes that may argue things. But I mean, Tony Ferguson wanted to make a point that he was going to make weight for his supposed to be fight with Khabib, and then decided to then have to cut weight again to fight Justin Gaethje a short time after that. He just did not seem to be the same guy that he normally is with his elusiveness. He was a step short. He was a step slower and took a pounding from a focused Justin Gaethje. And then the other perfect example is you have a kid who just doesn't want to do it. He doesn't believe in himself anymore. He knows that he's behind. He doesn't want to take any more damage. And the coaches took a lot of criticism because they're out there saying, no, listen, you got it. You can do it. Keep going. And the argument they make is they also know they're a fighter. So from the audience or from the announcer's perspective, you're hearing a kid want to quit and you're saying, well, why isn't the fight over? And the coaches are coming from another perspective where it's like, listen, I know this fighter. I know what I can say. I know how they're reacting.
He also wasn't like out on his feet.
Exactly.
He wasn't throttled. He was just losing, so they knew he should stay in for his own, that's their job. They're his coaches to push him. Exactly. But he also can't be, ashamed for making that decision for himself because, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I think in all those situations, there's never like a right answer, but I do think circumstances are different on when you're like the main event or the title fight. I think you're putting so much on the line that you just want to have that opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, Justin Gaethje goes into every fight, he says he's ready to die. I mean, he might be a guy who really is ready to do that. And I mean, to your point about coaches being there to coach, Mike Perry might be the only person who doesn't actually believe in that statement because he obviously had his girlfriend coach him and he won against Mickey Gall. And I mean, he had maybe he's going to make some decisions a little bit differently with his coaching and preparing for his next fight. But since COVID's happened, there's been so much fighting in front of no fans. So the early onset of COVID, there was the last UFC Brazil card that they decided to go forward with, and they had no fans in attendance. And since then, it's been either in Orlando or at the Apex Arena in Vegas, which I believe is where you fought against Amanda Nunes. What is that like, knowing that you fought in front of crowds before. When you fought the last time you'd fought in Edmonton in front of, a Canadian crowd that had to get you going, but then fighting in front of nobody other than essential personnel, like how did you adjust to that difference as well?
I kind of went into it with just a really good attitude about it. I was kind of excited to experience it and kind of have it feel almost like you're just doing another sparring session at the gym,
Yeah.
So, especially at the Apex, the cage was like pretty much the same size as the cage that I train in. So I was excited about that. The training that I've done has been in an empty room, for that fight I was training when no one else was in the gym. So it
Yeah.
was empty, quiet, just a couple people there. So it's kind of like, oh, this is going to be kind of similar, It was, and usually when I'm walking out, I hear my music, of course, and, I would normally hear the crowd, but I'm really trying to always just look ahead and not soak in. I never really like soaked in the moment of a crowd and
Yeah.
all that, usually until the fight's over. Um, so I kind of just looked at it like that. Like it's just going to be like normal, just going to hear my music and just walk out, put the Vaseline on and close the cage door. And it's all kind of similar. It was a little bit different, but I didn't really I don't think it affected me in a bad way. If anything, I think it was kind of a cool feeling, to be in a quiet room.
Now, are you the type of MMA fighter that's watching the other fights that are going on, like the other pay-per-views or the fight nights, and watching your friends or people you train with or people fight?
On fight night, not so much, but
Okay.
I'm not usually watching in the back room. I'm not super superstitious. I'm not like trying to avoid the fights that are going
Hmm.
on in the back room when I'm getting ready. But I usually just try not to really look. I don't really want to see like someone get knocked out or something right before I
Right.
go out. It doesn't put me on the side where I'm like pumped up about it. Like I'm
Gotcha.
more like, oh god. But yeah, I'm definitely always watching fights. At home and with friends and stuff like that. And actually just had some teammates fight last night. They had an online stream to watch
Oh, nice.
down here. Local combat night actually locally had an event, so things are picking up again. And yeah, I'm definitely a fan. When I'm not in training.
Now, did you happen to see the UFC Fight Island 3 at any point last night? Did you see any of those fights?
I was kind of multitasking during it, but I did
Right.
pay attention, pretty for most of the night. Yeah, I saw the. I was definitely impressed with Carla. I'm always a big Cookie Monster fan since her Invicta. So
So we with not really knowing what's going on with COVID right now, with certain places reducing the amount of people that they can be around or reducing the events and opening back up and then having to close again like we saw happen in Vegas a few weeks ago, there's a chance that Dana said, they're going to start putting fights on Fight Island up until and even into 2021. If you got the call and said, hey, listen, we're going to put you in on the main card, you're going to be fighting this person, but it's going to be in Abu Dhabi on Yas Island, is that affecting like your decision to take that fight at all, or are you just like, hell yeah, sweet opportunity, let's just jump right
yeah,
into it?
let's go.
Yeah.
That sounds like it would be an amazing experience for sure. Part of one of the great things about having this type of a career is to be able to go see new places. So I've definitely embraced that and hope that I can travel overseas, at some point. And Dubai looks beautiful. I would love to see it. So especially the Fight Island looks like it's to the nines. So I'd definitely be open to going there.
Yeah, it's definitely been a cool experience to sort of like watch, whether it's like the quarantine videos of our favorite MMA fighters of like them being by themselves, or getting to see the race car track, or the fact that they're fighting at like 3 a.m. local time is like when the main card is starting. So it's like a way different time than you would normally be ready to go fight. Now, I saw you post something recently on Instagram, and it got the brain going a little bit. Heavy hitters hot sauce. Where did this come from?
Well, actually, I did a few months ago, like a month before my fight, maybe or just a couple weeks before my fight, I had a giveaway on my page where I did like a raffle and I had a duffel bag of gear and then some other stuff. There was 5 people that were selected to win, and the Instagram page for Heavy Hitters Hot Sauce was one of the winners. So that's how we connected, and then they received their stuff very late. But either way, they had sent me as a thank you for sending them a T-shirt. They sent me a box of like 25 bottles of hot sauce.
Jeez.
So it was pretty awesome. They're based out of Toronto, so they were just, I think they were just really grateful to connect with me, and they sent me that, and I was really grateful that they were so generous, and I just wanted to give them a nice little shout out on that. And it's cool. They have like a hot sauce that kind of has a theme that relates to the fighting stuff, so it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I saw that and I was like, man, that looks, I mean, I saw the Scotch bonnet one, which is like my favorite kind of like hot sauce, and I was like, might have to give this one a try, Yeah. I mean, obviously, as we sort of talked about throughout this, you're a great role model for someone who wants to get started but doesn't know, where to begin. What would your piece of advice be?
I would first of all is just get a team that you feel comfortable with. You have to be able to train comfortably and trust the people that you train with. Obviously a variety of skills that you can train, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, kickboxing, everything else in between. So just having people that you can connect with, and not every gym is meant for every person, so you can bounce around and try and see who you connect with, and people that you trust not to be selfish and training too much. Like, everyone has to be a little bit selfish in training at the right time, but you just have to find those right personalities, and then the rest will come. The opportunities will come. If you trust people you're around, then you'll stay safe. It really comes from that. That's the best way to start.
And the last thing before I let you get out of here is, where did your nickname come from? Where did the FeeNom come from?
When I was an amateur, I can't remember which fight, but it was probably like my 3rd fight where I had a quick finish, and just in the comments on Facebook, one of my teammates said, first of all, my full name is Felicia. My nickname is Fee, F-E-E, easy. So one of the comments was Fee, F-E-E, nominal job, Felicia. So from there, it was like, oh, that's funny, and it was kind of catchy, and then people started, I liked it. People in the comments liked it, and then that's kind of how I started. I just ran with it. That was pretty it. And I didn't want it to be like Vitor Belfort is also the FeeNom, but it's spelled like it's supposed to be spelled. So I was like, okay, this is different enough, but it's actually my nickname, Nom. So I always wanted to make a shirt with like Pac-Man, like nom nom nom.
Nice. There you go. That's perfect.
Something cool, yeah. So maybe someone will help me out with that design.
There you go. Yeah, let's get that in the works. Listen, Felicia, I wanted to call you Fee now just because you put it into my head. I want to say thank you for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad to see that your recovery is going well, and hopefully we see you sometime at the end of the year or early 2020 back fighting in the featherweight division. Hopefully, for your sake, on Fight Island.
That would be awesome. Well, thank you again for having me. It was great to talk with you.
No problem. I am your host, Julian Ortiz of the Big O Podcast. Thank you for watching and listening. Have a great day, everybody.